So welcome everyone to today's webinar on demystifying labor codes. We are delighted to have Mr. Vadan sir, our veteran in HR carrying 30 plus years of expertise in labor laws and strategic compliances. As a Chief Consultation Officer at Aprajita Corporate Services, he is playing a key role in shaping organization's flagship compliance management services from 2005. Bringing unmatched clarity and practical insight to the discussion. Before starting the session, I require everyone, if you have any questions, please post in the chat box. We will be taking them later on after the session. So now I hand over the mic to Vadan sir.
Yeah, thank you, Shreya. Is the screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Right, okay.
Screen is visible.
Right. Sorry, what you said?
Screen is visible, sir.
Right, okay. So we can
I'm
go ahead
audible,
now.
sir. Yes, sir.
Right, okay. Yeah. So thank you for setting the context, Shreya. Very good morning, every one of you. And I take this opportunity to thank everyone for taking your time to attend this session. And I think I learned that most of the participants are from our clients. And on behalf of Aprajita, I would also take this opportunity to thank you for patronizing Aprajita for a long time. And yeah, I think as many of you may be aware, the codes were introduced some 5 years back, but it took almost 5 to 6 years for getting the date of implementation. Of course, for various there are a lot of hurdles, but still the government of India was able to notify the date of implementation. Thanks to government and all the stakeholders concerned for this. Yeah, there are a lot of again criticisms on the contents of these codes. Yeah, see, I think since the time of independence, this appears to be the one big change with respect to labor laws. And the industries were expecting it at least from 1991 when the corresponding economic reforms happened. But I think we have got the notification only very recently from 21/11/2025. Of course, I'm not very sure it is so very comprehensive or not, but still, I would say quantity-wise, the attempt is made to reduce the number of legislations or the number of compliance activities or the number of rules or sections per se, right? Of course, the more important point again is without compromising on the spirit of compliance, right? Without reducing any of the benefit or welfare of the employees. Yeah, so that is the background. So I'll just move on with my presentation. Yeah. So whatever changes we are talking about, it is happening only in the central sphere. Again, this subject labor, industrial disputes, and social security, all falling under the concurrent list of the Indian Constitution. So we have the laws enacted by the central government as well as by various state governments applicable to the industries. But the labor codes are on the central sphere only, right? So central labor legislations, the number is coming down, or probably you can see on your screens the code on wages. Now it will encompass in it the existing 4 legislations: the Payment of Wages Act, the Minimum Wages Act, the Equal Remuneration Act, and the Payment of Bonus Act. Similarly, the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code, it will have 13 legislations starting from the Factories Act, the Contract Labor, the Interstate Migrant Workers Act, the Building and Other Construction Workers Act, the Mines Act, the Motor Transport Workers Act. So 13 such central labor legislations will now get merged into one code called Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code. And third one is the Code on Social Security. As you know, PF, ESI, gratuity, employees compensation. Such a type of legislations, 9 legislations, gratuity also included there. So that will now become one code called Code on Social Security. And finally, the Industrial Relations Code, the existing Industrial Disputes Act, the Trade Unions Act, and the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act. All these legislations will now become one code called Industrial Relations Code. So thus you can see 29 existing legislations. On your right, the total count comes to 29. So 29 existing legislations, central labor legislations, will become just 4 codes. See, this is one idea. See, one of the ideas of bringing in labor reforms is to bring down the quantity as such, and also to ease the process when doing the compliance. I move on. Now, this is with respect to code on wages. As I said, probably the number of legislations may come down, but the concept called equal remuneration, the concept called minimum wages, the concept called payment of wages, the concept of payment of bonus, that will continue to be there. Probably you can see how the sections and probably the chapters are arranged under the code on wages. I would like to draw your attention to red font, where I have mentioned under chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right. So it will not continue to be as a separate legislation. Say, for example, Payment of Bonus Act. Now it is a separate legislation. But under the codes, it will become one chapter under code on wages. Right. And for all these 4 purposes, equal remuneration, minimum wage, payment of wage, and payment of bonus, all the other administrative items, definitions, and the enforcement, all those things will become common. See, that is how the other chapters are arranged. The advisory board, chapter 6, the payment of dues, claims, and audit, the procedure to be followed for all these 4 items. So that is how this is done. So with respect to the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code, the arrangement will be like this, right? Again, we have 13 chapters and we have 3 schedules attached to this code. And again, look at the chapter 11, which says special provisions for contract labor and interstate migrant workers. Under chapter 11, on your right, I think there are several parts. It is further divided into several parts. So the part 1 will discuss about the contract labor. It will discuss about the interstate migrant workers. And the part 2 will discuss about the audio visual work. Today we call them as cinema workers. So Cinema Workers Act is there. So that terminology is now getting changed. Instead of calling them as cine workers, they will be known as audio visual workers after the implementation of codes. Part 3 is about mines. Part 4 about BD and cigar industries. Part 5 is for Building and Other Construction Workers Act. And part 6 is about factories. So we may not have separate Factories Act, but this will become a part in chapter 11 under Occupational Safety Code. So again, all these provisions are taken care, right? So it is compiled. Now on your screens, it is the Code on Social Security. Again, I would like to draw your attention to the red font, chapter 3, from chapter 3. PF is there, then chapter 4, ESI, chapter 5, gratuity, chapter 6, maternity. So these provisions will continue to be there. These concepts will continue to be there, but it will remain as a chapter under one code. And finally, the Industrial Relations Code, again from chapter 3 to chapter 12, red font, right? It covers trade unions, it covers standing orders, and from chapter 5 to 12, it covers the provisions of the current Industrial Disputes Act. So nothing is left out. So the idea of compliance, the welfare or benefits or protection the workers had earlier, that would continue to be there, but it will be governed by only 4 codes instead of 29 separate legislations. That is how it is. Yeah. This is again a quick snapshot just to give you an idea. code on wages, first row, it talks about the number of legislations. Yes, currently we have 4 legislations that will become one code, right? Similarly, under Occupational Safety Code, 13 legislations will become one code. So instead of 29 legislations, there will be only 4 codes, right? Similarly, if you go to the sections, all the 4 legislations put together under code on wages, the total number of sections comes to 115. That will get reduced to 69. I would draw your attention to code on wages, both the columns, you can make a comparison. Similarly, rules, 67. Central rules alone I have considered. Currently, it is 67 for all the 4 rules. That will become 58. The number of terms defined is 46. That will become 26. The number of returns will come down from 3 to 0. Number of registers will come from 14 to 3. Number of abstracts, it will come from 2 to 0. Then the number of statutory notices to be displayed, it will reduce from 2 to 1. So you can also see the number varying for other codes. Only in case of industry relation code, you can see a slight increase when it comes to the question of number of sections. Instead of 88, this will become 104 because there are new concepts which are introduced through the industrial relations code. So that is one reason why the number of sections is getting increased. I move on. Yeah. So I think one of the major changes through this introduction of codes is change in definition of the term wages. Interestingly, not much change, but one crucial point, and this will have impact on all the 4 legislations: payment of bonus, payment of wages, minimum wages, and equal remuneration. And it will not just stop with that, it will also have implication on other codes also. Because again, the definition for the term wages is going to be the same for all the 4 codes. That is the reason. So I'll take some time to go through the definition of this term, and subsequently I have a few sample salary structures to make people understand how the position could vary compared to the present position, legal position. So the definition for wages, it has all the parts. Actually, it has a substantive part, it has inclusion part, it has exclusion part, and it will have provisos. It will also have separate explanation. We will just go through one by one. And the substantive part says all remuneration by way of salaries, allowances, or otherwise. So whatever is paid by the employer to any employee will be considered as remuneration. Right, and which should be expressed in terms of money, or it should be capable of being so expressed, and it should be as per the terms of the contract, which is the appointment order. And it specifically includes basic, dearness allowance, and retaining allowance. So when we say retaining allowance, it is for retaining the workers for the next season. So it is more, it will have reference to the seasonal industries. It will be applicable to seasonal industries. Normally, the industries which are operating on a perennial basis may not have this component called retaining allowance. So we are left with basic and DA. And the third portion is the exclusion part. I think this is considered to be very, very important. So right from class A to class K, all these components, whatever is mentioned, it is getting excluded. Bonus is excluded. Value of house accommodation excluded. Any contribution paid by the employer to any pension fund or provident fund, and the interest which may have accrued thereon, it is also getting excluded. Conveyance allowance, any sum paid to defray special expenses, house rent allowance, remuneration payable under any award or settlement, any overtime allowance, any commission payable, any gratuity payable on termination, any retrenchment compensation. So all these payments will get excluded from the definition of the term wages. Subsequent slide also, the definition continues. I'll go to that. Yeah. So this contains the provisos and the explanation. This proviso 1 is so very important because this particular point makes the huge impact or expected to make huge impact. So we discussed on the definition of wages, the primary part, and also the exclusions. Provided for calculating wages under this class, if payments made by the employer to the employee under classes A to I, they have not included J and K. J is gratuity and K is the retrenchment compensation. So it is very clearly excluded. From A to I, the total sum of A to I exceeds 1/2. That is 50%. If it is more than 50%, or such other person, which means the central government can revise this percentage. Now it is set at 50%. It can vary in case if the government comes up with a fresh notification in this behalf. So if it exceeds 1/2, as may be notified by central government, of the all remuneration calculated under this class, the amount which exceeds such 1/2 or the person so notified shall be deemed as remuneration and shall be accordingly added in wages under this class. So it very clearly says the total sum of the exclusion part, classes from A to I, if it goes beyond 50%, then the excess amount of the 50%, that will also be added back to wages. That will be considered as part of wages that will get added to basic and DA. That is what it says. And specifically, I'll go back to the previous slide. I would like to draw your attention to classes D, F, G, and H, which are in red font. All these four classes, those payments would be considered as still part of wages for the purposes of payment of wages and equal remuneration. Only for these two purposes. Otherwise, these four components will get excluded for any other purpose. Right, that is how it is. And finally, the explanation part, where an employee is given in lieu of the whole or part of the wages payable to him, any remuneration in kind by his employer, the value of such remuneration in kind, which does not exceed 15% of the total wages payable to him, shall be deemed to form part of the wages of such employee. So this very clearly says there is a provision for making payment of wages in kind, but it cannot go beyond 15% of the total wages. That is number one. Number two, this is possible only if the appropriate government issues notification. So only if the appropriate government allows, the respective companies can go in for making payment of wages in kind, that too subject to the limit of 15%. Otherwise, it is not possible. So for your information, as on today, whether the central government or any other appropriate governments, they have not given notification for going ahead with making payment of wages in kind. So it is practically not possible as on today. Tomorrow, using this provision, if any of the appropriate governments comes up with a notification, then it is possible. So this is how the definition is. So the crucial part is, as I said, the proviso, first proviso, which puts a cap on the total sum of the exclusion part. So exclusion part cannot go beyond 50%. Now, as I said in the beginning, I have a few sample salary structures. I'll try to explain that how this will apply for various purposes. Yeah, I think you are on your screens, you can see a sample salary structure, very simple structure. The total monthly gross comes to 18,000. So where basic is 6,000, HRA 4,000, conveyance allowance 4,000, commission 4,000. All these three allowances are excluded. They fall under the excluded portion as per the new definition. So, but the total sum comes to 12,000. The excluded portion, the total quantum comes to 12%, which works out to more than 50%. That is, this comes to 66.6%. So it exceeds 50%, which is not allowed, right? Because as we saw, the first proviso, it puts a cap that exclusion portion cannot go beyond the 50%. The 50% here is 9,000, right? So, but 3,000 more is there. So in this situation, for this salary structure, the excess 3,000 will be added with basic, which is 6,000. So that will become 9,000. So at least 50% of the monthly gross would be considered as wages. Today, some of us in our companies may have a salary structure like this. I think that there is no query on this as of now, and this is considered to be a fairly legally valid structure. But after the introduction of codes, because of the change in the definition of the top wages, so this position, legal position, will change. So we cannot continue to have a salary structure like this. In case we have these four components starting from basic to commission, then we should ensure that basic works out to at least 9,000. That is how we may have to revise, since the codes are having an effective date from 21/11. It is better we start revisiting our salary structure. But in some of the companies, if we have already the wage portion working out to 50% or more than 50%, we need not definitely necessarily do restructuring, or we need not revisit the salary structure. Only in cases, only with respect to the companies whose salary structure, in whose salary structures the wage portion works out to less than 50%, our suggestion, Aparajita's suggestion, would be to revisit and to make the wage portion at least work out to 50%. One more point on this, since I think I'll go back. Yeah, see, look at the exclusion part. The proviso says the total sum of the classes from A to I. That is what they say. But class A is about bonus. Bonus is essentially an annual component, which is to be calculated and paid after the end of the accounting year, after the P&L account of the company is finalized. So it is not a monthly payment, and it is not released along with the monthly salary. So I don't think we can add this quantum to decide on the 100% remuneration. Similarly, class C, which talks about any contribution paid by the employer to any pension or provident fund. So this is again employer's contribution towards PF, employer's contribution towards pension, and they do not just stop with that, and the interest which may have accrued thereon. I think calculating this amount itself will be difficult, and I don't think we can add this amount. So practically, when we say from A to I, we may have to skip class A and class C. Other classes alone, whatever allowances we have in our regular monthly structure, all those we may have to add up, and we should ensure that the total quantum of these allowances should not go beyond 50%. So probably in my entire discussion, I'll keep this as base for going ahead. Yeah. Now we'll move on. Yeah. Now on your screens, I have come up with three situations. Very simple salary structure, and this is about where we pay mere minimum rates of wages. So there are situations in case of the regular employees, most of the companies would pay definitely much above the mere minimum rates of wages. But with respect to the contract workers and with respect to employees who are engaged on a casual basis, on a daily wage basis, normally the industries would tend to pay only the mere minimum rates of wages. So these three cases are mainly for that purpose. So case one, the minimum rate of wages assumed to be 12,000. This 12,000 is split up into basic 10,000, DA 10,000, dearness allowance. So the total is 12,000. So as if we apply the current definition, both basic and dearness allowance are included, right? So entire 12,000 is considered to be wages in the first scenario, case one. So this split up is all right even after the implementation of the codes. Now come to case two, where there is no split up. One consolidated payment, 12,000 per month, and 12,000 is the minimum wage. To whomsoever you are paying this minimum wage, you are in order. This is in line with what the law says, in accordance with the new definition of the term wages. Now come to case 3. I've consciously put it in red font again. And the split up is basic 10,000, HRA 2,000. This split up is not allowed, right? Again, we know when we saw the classes under the exclusion, HRA is excluded. So even after the implementation of codes, if we continue to have this structure, you may actually make a payment of 12,000, the gross salary. But for the purpose of law, it would be only seen as 10,000 because HRA is treated to be an excluded part that will not be treated as part of wages. So the authority can say that it is short of minimum wages. So the basic should be 12,000 in this situation. Otherwise stated, in cases where you are paying mere minimum rates of wages, you can split that minimum wage only as basic and DA. We cannot bring in other allowances. What I learn is some of the companies, particularly with respect to contract workers, they add HRA today because the minimum wages aren't allowed, but now the position is getting changed, right? So this is how the effect is going to be because of the change in definition for the term wage. So particularly with respect to case 3, if you have split up like this, where you are paying mere minimum rates of wages, our suggestion would be to review this particular structure. Yeah, I move on. Yeah, this is also with respect to minimum wages only, but not the mere minimum rates. It is more than that. Again, there are 3 components: basic, DA, HRA. So this comes to 12,000. Monthly gross comes to 12,000. Prior to codes, this is fine. Absolutely no change is required. No employer need to review this salary structure. But under the codes, HRA is as wages, right? So for this salary structure, 6,000 plus 3,000, basic and DA, 9,000 will be considered as wages, right? But the assumption here is in the top, you can see minimum wages is 10,000. So you should make this structure in such a manner, the basic and DA works out to at least 10,000. HRA should be over and above that. That is how probably we may have to see because of the change in definition of the term wages from minimum wages perspective. I have a few more slides discussing on this on other specific areas. This is on bonus. Again, basic and DA, it comes to 14,000, 10,000, 4,000. House rent is 6,000. Conveyance allowance is 6,000. Commission 6,000. The total allowance amount, the exclusion portion comes to 18,000, which is more than 50% of the monthly gross. So this structure in the first place is not in accordance with law. Today, what we will do prior to codes, we used to calculate bonus considering this 14,000 as wages, right? But the position will slightly change. After the introduction of codes, it cannot be 14,000. Wages for the purpose of bonus should be at least 16,000 because 50% of monthly gross is 16,000. Otherwise, for calculation purpose, yes, whether it is 14,000 or 16,000, it is less than 21,000. The person is entitled, but for calculation, you can restrict it to 7,000 or minimum rates of wages, whichever is higher. No change in all those stuffs. But when you mention the quantum of wages with this for this gross salary, it should be 16,000 for the purpose of bonus. It cannot be 14,000, right? That is how the change compared to prior to codes and after the post the implementation of the codes. I move on. Now it is for ESI. ESI, I have 2 samples. Basic is 12,000, DA 6,000, HRA 6,000. Total comes to sample 1, total comes to 24,000. And today, HRA is considered to be wages for the purposes of ESI. Prior to codes, I'm saying. So total is 24,000. This is more than 21,000. So this person will go out of the purview of ESI Act. So situation is prior to codes, this person need not be covered under ESI. But after the implementation, the position will change because HRA is not treated as part of wages, even for ESI purpose. So the quantum will be only 12,000 plus 6,000, basic and DA, which will work out to 18,000. which is less than 21,000. Therefore, for this same salary structure, this person would now come under the purview of ESI, and employer's contribution and employee's contribution ought to be remitted for calculated and remitted for 18,000. So the position changes because of the change in definition. The first proviso under the definition. Now come to sample 2. Again, same basic DA and HRA, 8,000, 4,000, 4,000, total comes to 16,000. Total 16,000 itself is less than 21,000, so this person is coverable. So prior to courts, the contributions will be made on 16,000. But as to the coverage of the individual, the same position will continue even after the implementation of courts, but the quantum of salary will come down, because for this salary structure, HRE is not treated as part of wages. So the quantum will be only 12,000. So for this situation, after the implementation of code, it is sufficient if the contributions are made only on 12,000. It is not on 16,000. So that is the change again. So that is one main reason why I have come up with two different samples, because there could be with some salary structure, there could be that would be advantageous to some of the stakeholders. With some because of the change in the definition, for some salary structures, it could work as a disadvantage to some of the stakeholders. So I just thought I could highlight all these aspects. Now I move on. Gratuity is another important area. Of course, the payment will arise only at the time of termination of services of a person. So monthly gross, in this example, it comes to 30,000, and DA, my basic and DA works out to 12,000. Again, this salary structure per se is not in order, right? Because the exclusion portion comes to 18,000, which works out to more than 50%, right? But currently what we will do, if we have a structure like this prior to courts, we will work out gratuity, keeping the salary as 12,000, right? But post to the implementation of courts, for this salary structure, it should be at least 50% of the salary, which means we should calculate for 15,000. So instead of 12,000, post the implementation of courts, gratuity is to be calculated for this salary structure on 15,000. That is going to be the change. So the quantum will increase. That is how it is. I think we have come to the end of all the sample salary structure. So we saw what exactly is the definition of wages under the labor codes and how this could impact. I've come up with sample salary structures only for some key areas, right? ESI, gratuity, bonus, minimum wages and all. Of course, this will have application on other areas also. PF, maternity benefit, workman compensation, all other aspects, and also in calculating overtime, in calculating leave encashment, all those stuffs are there. But the point is, the principle will not change. When I say principle, probably you could have seen in some of the judgments given by the Apex Court. The last judgment, landmark judgment, was in Vivekananda Mandir case, where it held some of the allowances to be basic wages, and those allowances are to be reckoned for the purpose of PF. So the idea is, what is basic? I think many of the legislations, even the existing legislations, they define the term wages, but not basic pay. PF Act is the only act which defines the term basic pay. So probably taking a cue from the definition given under PF Act, I think as early in 1963, Bridge and Roof case and Burma Shell case, and recently the Vivekananda Mandir case, the court very clearly said whatever is paid universally, necessarily and ordinarily. Shortly we call it as UNO, you know. So if irrespective of the nomenclature of the component, if it is normally paid when a person attends to office, attends to factory, then that would be treated as basic, right? And allowances, on the other hand, those are all contingent payments, which means when I say conveyance allowance, it presupposes me undertaking travel, right? So I should undertake travel in the first place. So it will be in the nature of a reimbursement, right? Compensation. So when there is some contingency like this is attached, then those payments will be considered as excluded part. You need not treat all those, whatever name you give, right? So you need not consider it as basic, and that can get excluded. But we cannot merely give the name as, say, conveyance allowance or project allowance or special allowance and make a fixed quantum of payment on regular basis without having any contingency. If that is so, then if the authorities take cognizance, then I think they can lift the wheel and understand the real purpose. They can come to a conclusion, though it is paid in the name of conveyance allowance or paid in the name of special allowance, this should be treated as only basic, right? So that is what is the difference. So it is not the mere nomenclature, instead the actual purpose for which one payment is made. So we need to have a proper salary policy, wage policy, written document, a control document, so that in case if the enforcement officers, when they visit our officers for inspection, we will be able to substantiate. So that is the idea. There is no change in these principles already laid down by various judgments, right? Because of this definition. Only thing is certain aspects are changing because of this new definition under the new labor codes. Yeah. So with this, I move on to the other portion. Key changes. What I'm planning is just to highlight the key changes on again various areas, starting from minimum wages. I'm not in a position to touch upon the entire provisions of all the codes, but the time may not be sufficient for us. I move on. Now, I think under Minimum Wages Act, so I have divided into two portions just for the purpose of easiness to understand. So prior to codes, the Minimum Wages Act will be applicable only to those types of employments, that is types of industries which are mentioned under the schedule attached to the Minimum Wages Act. For the non-scheduled industries, I think Minimum Wages Act was not applicable, right? But after the implementation of codes, now this minimum wages portion under code on wages is made applicable to all industries and all employees. But only thing is the minimum rates of wages should have been prescribed by the appropriate governments. Right? The appropriate government will continue to prescribe, and if that is there, quantum is fixed, then the employers are supposed to make a payment not less than the minimum rates of wages. So the main point here is now the minimum wages portion will be applicable to all industries. It is not restricted to any specific list as was the case earlier. Then national floor level minimum wage, the next point. Today we have this concept, but this does not have statutory backup. Right. So this one quantum is there. It is notified by the central government. And in case if for any of the industries, Minimum Wages Act is not applicable, then those industries normally as a practice used to pay the quantum which is prescribed as national floor level minimum wage. That is there as an industrial practice, but it is also not a statutory mandate. It was a guideline. It was just there in the practice. But now, instead of national floor level minimum wage, this term will be known as mere floor wage. That is number one. This floor wage will be fixed by the central government. The floor wage will be fixed by the central government. And the appropriate governments will continue to fix the minimum rates of wages. The catch is the minimum rates of wages cannot be less than the floor wage fixed by the central government. So indirectly, the statutory force is given to the floor wage. That is the idea. Of course, now the floor wages need not necessarily be one single quantum. It can vary geography-wise. It is possible. And HRA not part of wages as per the new definition. But prior to the implementation of codes, under the Minimum Wages Act, for the purposes of minimum wages, HRA was treated as part of wages. That position is specifically with respect to minimum wages, it is changing. And we were also considering the monthly gross, whether it is equivalent to or more than the minimum rates prescribed. determine whether a particular person is paid the minimum rates of wages or not. That position is again slightly getting changed because of the change in the definition of the term wages. Now, the wage portion, the Act says, code says it should be at least 50%. Irrespective of whether it works out to 50% or 52% or 57 or 60%, the wage portion shall be equivalent to or more than minimum rates of wages. Over and above only, whatever is left, we can bring in allowances. Otherwise, it will not be treated as a proper salary structure. Again, I repeat, the quantum of the wage portion in a salary structure should be minimum of 50%. It can go above 50%. That is number one. Number two, irrespective of whether it is 50% or 55% or 60%, that quantum should be equivalent to or more than the minimum rates. So there are two conditions. Only then, I think that is what on your right side, the last point, it says no employer shall pay to any employee wages less than the minimum rate of wages notified by the appropriate government under section 5 of the new code on wages. Yeah, so these are all some of the changes specifically with respect to minimum wages. Now I move on. So this is under payment of wages. You know, currently under Payment of Wages Act, under section 1(6), those persons who are drawing more than 24,000 as monthly salary, those are all going out of the purview of Payment of Wages Act. Right? That ceiling is removed now. So irrespective of the quantum of salary a person is drawing, all the persons employed will be treated as employees for the purposes of payment of wages. In case you are maintaining some statutory register for this purpose, then now you may have to take into account all the persons employed irrespective of the quantum of salary they are drawing. You cannot restrict it to 24,000, which was the case early. The second point, gratuity, again we saw under the definition of the term wages, the K, class K, right? Clearly it is getting excluded. So that is for all purposes only, but I specifically I have brought it here because in one of the judgments by the Madras High Court, the Madras Fertilizers case, it was held that gratuity was treated to be part of wages. That is the reason even today in Tamil Nadu alone, since this is treated as wages, if the contractor fails to pay gratuity, then the liability passes on to the principal employer, of course, only in Tamil Nadu, right? Because of this judgment, it is not there in all the states, but of course, very few states have this idea. But of course, because of the change in the definition of gratuity, now I think these judgments will get nullified. So this no more will be valid. And the third point, I think more importantly, we may have to have a look on this because this is about the process we may have. We will have challenges because the wage settlement is to be made within 2 working days after the actual date of relieving, right? But today, it is not applicable for resignation cases. Even today, that is the position, but it is only with respect to retirement or other types of termination, not for resignation cases. But under the codes, even for resignation cases, the wage settlement is to be made within 2 working days, right? So probably in case if an employee conveys his intention of resigning from the company, then we may have to strictly insist for serving the notice period, whether it is 1 month or 2 months. Only then we will have sufficient time to work out all these settlement items, then make the final settlement within 2 working days after actually the person gets relieved from the company. Then if there are more than 1,000 employees working in an industrial establishment, for them, I think for that company, it is sufficient if the monthly wage is released before 10th of the subsequent month. Normally, the calendar month will be the wage period. So after the end of the wage period, within 10 days, it is to be paid. But whoever is engaging less than 1,000 employees, it is to be paid 7 days. Now, irrespective of a company has less than 1,000 employees or more than 1,000 employees, the wage is to be released within 7 days. So the 10 days time, it will no more be available for the employers. And the total deduction from the salary, monthly salary of an employee can go up to 75% today. Normally it is 50%. If the deduction is towards the cooperative societies, then it can go up to 75%. But after the introduction of codes, the total deductions cannot go beyond 50% of the monthly salary of an employee. So these are all certain key changes. I think you may have to immediately look for making changes in your respective companies also. So I'm just highlighting those aspects only. So this is with respect to payment of wages. Now payment of bonus. Yeah, we are aware that the salary ceiling for a person to become eligible for payment of bonus is 21,000. This is for eligibility. But in the codes, it is not mentioned, the quantum is not mentioned, and the powers are given to the appropriate governments to notify. So the point here is probably the different appropriate governments can come up with different quantum for eligibility, right? So we may have to wait for the notification. Till such time, we can continue with 21,000, whatever is applicable currently. Similarly, for calculation purpose, for bonus, we can restrict the salary to 7,000 or minimum rates of wages, whichever is higher. That is the current situation. That also the powers are given to the appropriate government. So again, we may have to wait for notification from the appropriate governments. And today, yes, we can make bonus payment by any mode, not necessarily by giving bank credit. It can be by way of cash or even by way of check and all. But after the introduction of codes, it should be done only by giving bank credit. I think that is becoming a mandate now. And there are certain misconducts. When proved, the payment of bonus can be withheld for that person, for that accounting year, right? Along with whatever misconducts mentioned now, the conviction for sexual harassment, that is also added as a cause for disqualification for becoming eligible for bonus. So these are all again certain important aspects with respect to bonus. Then contract labor. Yeah. So the regular workers of a contractor, they are very clearly excluded, expressly excluded under the codes. Even today, that is the situation, but it is not expressly mentioned, right? So there is a confusion. Some of the companies, they used to add both the regular employees of the contractor as well as those persons who are specifically hired for that purpose. Both the categories of these people are considered to be contract workers. In many of the cases, I think that happens like that only. But the act, as per the code, it is very clear in the definition itself. It clearly excludes those employees of the contractors who are all regular employees. They should not be treated as contract workers. And the company shall pay to the contractor the monthly consideration before the contractor makes the payment of wages to his workers, because the contractor as an employer has to make the payment within 7 days. So to enable him to make the payment, the principal employer in the first place has to release the monthly consideration to him. Only out of that consideration, he is supposed to make a payment of wages to his workers. I think this is mandated through Rule 55. I have put it in the red font, since the rules have not yet enforced, but still this is going to be the case actually. And principal employer, as on today, he is not liable for making payment of bonus to contract workers, right? But after the implementation of code, the same position will continue. The contractor is supposed to make the bonus payment, but in case if the contractor fails, then the principal employer should pay at least the minimum rates of payment of bonus actually. That is the 8.33%. And now under the term employer, under all the 4 codes, it would very expressly include contractor, right? Currently, yes, same position only, but it is not specifically mentioned. But now it is very clear under the definition of the term employer. So it is a kind of more regularization only. Most of the points here, but this contract labor points are only with respect to code on wages. Of course, under occupational safety code also, we have few more points which we'll discuss. Yeah, now we are seeing on your screens some of the common points for all the 4 areas: equal remuneration, payment of bonus, minimum wages, and payment of wages. The code defines both the term employee and worker. Just to get the difference, probably in the intersection portion, you can see the skilled employees, unskilled workers, manual workers, those who are involved in operational, technical, and clerical work. So intersection portion, then these categories of workers will fall under both the definitions. In the worker definition, simultaneously they are included in the employees definition also. In addition, the supervisors who are drawing less than 15,000, they will be treated as workers, right? In case if the salary is more than 15,000, they will be treated as employees. And the working journalists and sales promotion employees, they are all considered to be workers, whereas the persons who are involved in managerial or administrative jobs, they are all excluded, right? Under the employee definition, you can see the semi-skilled I have put in the first place. Ideally, this semi-skilled workers should also fall under the intersection portion, but under the definition of worker, it is missing. So, but under the definition of employees, it is included. So specifically, I have brought it there because it is there in the statute book. But I think this is a miss. This should ideally come in the intersection portion. Just it is for your information. I move on. So the period of limitation, second point, is 3 years for any claim. In case of any shortage of minimum wages or shortage of payment of wages or bonus or delay in payment of bonus or excess deduction, the claim can be made within 3 years. Currently, from 6 months to 2 years, we have that window for different purposes, but now it is made as 3 years for all cases. And going forward, the inspection will be web-based inspection, for which we may have to wait for the clear scheme to be introduced. And the inspectors will be known as the inspectors cum facilitators. So they will give at least guidance in the first place. They will facilitate both the employer as well as the workers as to the compliance. And the first instance itself, they will not go for any prosecution. They will give a chance for the employer. Subsequently, if the employer does not fall in line or they are not going ahead with the compliance properly, only then they will go in for prosecution actually. Then next point is the court can take cognizance directly from employee and the registered trade union. I think the employers should be wary of this particular point. So even if if the employee makes a complaint to the court directly, it can take cognizance, right? So earlier, what will happen? It will happen only through the inspectors. If he finds any non-compliance, then he will initiate the process. But now I think it can be done by a single employee or it can be done by a registered trade union. And in case of any dispute, the burden of proof will lie with the employer. And geographical areas are classified as metropolitan, non-metropolitan, and rural. This is based on the rules only that get to be implemented. This is based on the population. That is how they have decided. And the undisbursed due, if any amount is remaining unpaid, then that shall be paid to the authority concerned within 6 months, right? Then I think the authority will keep it for 7 years actually. Within 7 years, if there is no claim, then he has to deal it with a way to be, for which the guidance are still to be issued. Based on that, they may have to disperse, right? But as far as the employer is concerned, they have to wait for 6 months. Probably they can indicate death of the employee, or if the whereabouts of the employee is not known, is not traceable, then if possible, employer can make the payment to the nominee. If nomination is not also proper or a nomination is not available, then the employer has to deposit it with the authority concerned within 6 months. And the new concept of compounding of offense, it is now introduced. So when we say compounding of offense, for the first time, if any contravention is noticed, probably there will be a designated officer for this purpose. The employer can approach that officer, and on an application from the employer, the officer will close the case by getting 50% of the maximum fine prescribed for that contravention. But that will be available only for the first time, not subsequently. That is number one. Number two, in case if a particular contravention warrants imprisonment or fine and imprisonment, for which this is not possible, where only fine is prescribed as a punishment. Only in those cases, I think we can go in for compounding of offense. And in all the cases, the quantum of penalty, it is not only under code on wages, other codes also. Yeah. So I think with that, we have come to an end of code on wages. Now we are looking at the factories. It is under coming under occupational safety code. Again, where a manufacturing process is carried on with the aid of power, if there are minimum 10 persons, then that premises will be considered as a factory. In case if the manufacturing process is carried on without the aid of power, manually, if it is done, then there shall be minimum of 20 persons, right, for that premises to become a factory. This threshold of 10 and 20 is now getting increased to 20 and 40. On your right side, you can see the comparison. Instead of 10 and 20, it will become 20 and 40. So till such time that number is reached, I think that particular premises need not be brought under the scope of the factories portion under the occupational safety code. And engaging women workers during the night shift is generally not permitted. Section 66(1)(b) of the Factories Act. But after the implementation, of course, it is permitted. But of course, the consent of the individual women worker shall be obtained. And whatever conditions laid down, even drawing some of the items from the POSH Act. So in case if a woman worker or employee is engaged during the night time, when we say night time, it is after 7 p.m. before 6 a.m. in the morning. So some provisions special for transport or for stay, all those things. No, I think those conditions are there, that all those conditions are to be met with. And overtime, it is an obligation today on the part of the workers. If they are asked to work overtime, they have to necessarily do. If they refuse, then that can be considered as a misconduct. It is possible action can be taken. But after the implementation of code, yes, the employer can ask a worker to do overtime, but only with the consent of the worker, right? And the number of overtime in a quarter, a continuous period of 3 months, it can go up to 75 hours. That is the present provision. But under the codes, it is getting raised to 125 hours. So overtime alone, apart from the regular working hours. And independent director, I think they cannot be nominated as occupier. See, there is one provision which is very important as far as the factories are concerned. One director in the board of the company is to be nominated and designated as occupier of the factory, and that needs to be communicated to the authority concerned, right? But the board can contain whole-time directors, simultaneously the independent directors, but we cannot nominate an independent director. It should be one among the whole-time directors only. And it is very important that this is done and this is communicated to the authority concerned. The reason being, in case if it is not done, then subsequent to inspection, when the inspector wants to send the notice, he can send it to any of the directors of his choice, right? But on the other hand, if we have notified as to who is the occupier for our factory, then he has to necessarily send the notice only to that person. He cannot send it to any other person. See, that is the advantage. So it is better we be aware of this particular provision and notify this aspect to the authority concerned. And for appointment of safety officer in a factory, there must be a minimum of 1,000 workers. And for welfare officer, it is 500. For providing canteen, it is 250. All these threshold limit, no, it is coming down. Under the codes, even if a factory has 500 or more workers, then an exclusive safety officer is to be appointed. Even if there is 250 or more workers, then welfare officer is to be appointed. And if there are 100 or more workers, then canteen is to be provided. So these are all certain things which are more advantageous for the workers, employees. So I think these are all the points with respect to factories. I move on. Now, as I said, contract labor with respect to occupational safety. Most important point is, yes, today the act will be applicable if there are 20 or more contract workers. Generally, the number could slightly vary in some of the states, but generally it is 20, both for the principal employer as well as for the contractor, right? But this threshold is getting increased to 50. So up to 49, the contract labor portion, that is part 1 under chapter 11 of the Occupational Safety Code, will not be applicable. Only if there are more than 49, 50 or more, only then this will become applicable. There is going to be a major change actually. Then the term core activity is defined, and for core activity, contract labor cannot be engaged. It is completely prohibited, and common license is possible. Today, most of the inspectors insist for unit specific licenses under the Contract Labor Act. But once the codes are introduced, the common license for multiple units of the same company, it is possible. And under section 17 of the current Contract Labor Regulation Abolition Act, the contractor is responsible for providing amenities, starting from providing drinking water to the contract workers. But now the liability is latched on the principal employer. It is not on the contractor. And only those workers who are hired through a contractor in one state to be deployed in an establishment which is situated in another state, only those workers were considered to be interstate migrant workers. So the interstate migrant workers would be contract workers in the first place. That was the position prior to 2111, right? But after the introduction of codes, even the direct employees, if hired from other states, they could also become interstate migrant workers. So it is not just restricted to contract workers, but the catch is, if they are drawing more than 18,000 per month, then they will not be treated as interstate migrant workers, whether they are hired directly or hired through a contractor. If the salary goes beyond 18,000, then they will not be considered as interstate migrant workers. Yeah, now on your screens, certain specific points with respect to interstate migrant workers. The threshold currently is 5. That is getting increased to 10. If there are 10 or more interstate migrant workers engaged in an establishment, then for them, the interstate migrant worker portion, part 1 of chapter 11 of Occupational Safety Code, will become applicable. And the second point I already discussed earlier, all the interstate migrant workers would be necessarily contract workers. After the implementation of code, it need not be, right? Even the direct employees can become interstate migrant worker. And in case of any accident to any interstate migrant worker, currently the accident report will be submitted in the place where he is actually working. But after the introduction of codes, the report information shall be given to the authority in his home state also, right? And the relatives of the individual, for them also the information is to be given. So that is the change with respect to them. And the displacement allowance, earlier there was a provision for making this payment only at the time, first time he's coming from his home state to his place of employment, it was paid, but this provision is now removed under the codes. So the employers need not make this payment anymore. And journey allowance every year for the interstate migrant worker and for his family members for going to his home state and to come back, some amount is to be paid, which is considered to be journey allowance, which is in addition to whatever benefits he is entitled to. And the benefits of a public distribution system, he can avail this system either in the home state or in the destination state of his choice. And toll-free helpline should be available for the interstate migrant workers to enable them to get in touch with their family members regularly, free of cost actually. But of course, for all these things, the appropriate government should come up with specific schemes. So I think most of these points, it is based on our experience during the first wave of COVID. particularly with respect to interstate migrant workers. Yeah, certain common points. Now appointment orders are made mandatory. See, even for direct employees, some of the companies are not issuing appointment orders, and appointment order is not mandatory also, right? It is not made as a mandate under Factories Act or the state-specific shops and establishments act, except a few states, right? But under the codes, I think you can look at section 6(1)(f). Every employer shall issue a letter of appointment to every employee on his appointment in the establishment with such information. So your format will be prescribed. It should be issued within 3 months. In case in your establishment, if some of the employees are not still issued with appointment order for some reason, it is better you come up with a format. I think the draft rules are already ready. We are just waiting for the implementation only. But still, our suggestion would be please issue appointment orders to your employees in case if it is not done. And second point is third-party audit and certification. So the government will form a panel, right? It will be a panel of experts independent of the government machinery, and they will do the audit for startup companies and other categories of companies which are specifically mentioned under the scheme to be framed. So the report of the audit will be submitted to the employers concerned as well as simultaneously to the government. So after going through the audit report, if the government feels that any of the changes are to be brought in some of the existing codes, then they will do it. That is the idea. And so this will be on a continuous basis. And single registration, now we are doing registration under Factories Act, we are doing a registration under Shops Act, we are doing registration under PF, ESI, Contract Labor, ISMW. But after the introduction of codes, it is going to be only one common registration, right? So for those establishments which are already in existence, this should be done within 60 days. Other establishments which are coming into existence after the introduction of codes, they have only 45 days to do this registration. But of course, we as existing establishments need not do anything now. Let us wait for the rules to be framed and notified. And daily hours, weekly hours, other working conditions shall be fixed by the appropriate governments. But central government has said that daily hours of work cannot exceed 8. So subject to this, the appropriate governments can come up with their own rules. Weekly hours cannot go beyond 48. Rest interval cannot go beyond, should be minimum of half an hour, and spread over cannot go beyond 12 hours. And another important aspect is a worker working in a factory, today he will become eligible for leave if he works for at least 240 days in a continuous period of 12 months, right? That 240 is now getting reduced to 180. So if a worker is working for 180 days in a continuous period of 12 months, then he will become eligible for leave at the rate of 1 day for every 20 days of work performed to be availed in the subsequent years. And there is a provision for having common license under Factories Act, Contract Labor Act, and BD and Cigar Establishment Act. I think, and this will be valid for 5 years also. Of course, we have to wait for the rules to be announced. And today, whenever an establishment is commenced, I think when they make arrangements, construction of building, I think they will come up with the amenities for both men and women separately. But after the implementation of codes, it should be made for transgender also. So provision should be there for men, women, and the third gender. And health examination, again, it is made as a mandatory thing. Both, I think whoever is more than 45 years of age. But this is only with respect to factories, mines, docks, and whoever is involved in building and other construction working activity. Only in these four situations, those employees who are above 45 years of age, the health examination is to be done on an annual basis within 120 days from January 1 every year, which means from January 1 to April 30th, 120 days. During this period, the examination is to be done and the report is to be maintained by the employer. It is now made as a mandate, and the suggestion is this should not be seen as an expenditure to the employer, but it is an investment to keep the workers fit for the work. Probably this should ideally reduce absenteeism and increase productivity. That is the idea. Yeah, I think with that we have come to an end of Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code. Now we move on to Code on Social Security. As far as PF is concerned, there is not going to be much change. Whatever we are doing already, we can continue to do with that. Of course, till such time, new Provident Fund scheme is introduced. I think that will take at least one more year. So practically there is no change. But of course, if we go through the draft of the code or the draft of the other rules, we derive that the ceiling, salary ceiling, which is 15,000 currently, that may not be available for people who are coming under the Provident Fund Act. But we may have to look at the provision of the scheme to be framed. But currently, as I said, we need not go for any change. We can continue with whatever we are practicing. And there is no change with respect to employees pension scheme or with respect to EDLI scheme. Similarly, for ESI also, there is not going to be any change. Whatever we are doing already, we can continue to do that unless and otherwise specific instructions or specific notifications are issued. And there is a confusion among the employers because the threshold limit for application of PF Act is 20. Whether in determining the 20, whether the excluded employees are also to be counted or not, whoever is drawing more than 15,000. But under the codes, it is very clear, all those employees are also to be taken into account. So whoever is drawing less than 15,000 or more than 15,000, all those employees are to be taken into account. If the number comes to 20 or more, then I think that establishment has to necessarily cover themselves under the provisions of the Provident Fund. And the apprentices coming under the Apprentices Act, they are very specifically excluded, right? But the companies may have a practice of engaging trainees or apprentices or learners on a, I'm not very sure, on their own policy, but I think that will not clearly qualify because very specifically under the codes, the apprentices registered under the Apprentices Act alone are getting exempted. So in case if that is introduced, then we may have to have a relook at engaging learners, such learners, trainees or apprentices. Then in case if we want to get exemption from the PF Act, like we maintaining our own trust, only there are, if there are more than 100 persons, only then we can seek for exemption. Then ESI, under ESI now voluntary coverage is possible, right? Earlier it not so, but if similar to what provision we have for PF. Currently for PF, voluntary coverage is possible even if the establishment does not have 20. Similarly, for ESI it is 10 persons, but even if there are less than 10 persons, if the management and the majority of employees, they want to go for avail ESI benefit, they can go in for voluntary coverage. But subsequently, if they want to withdraw, they can withdraw also. And for plantations, now medical facilities mentioned under the Plantations Labour Act, that could be applicable. It is not applicable, but now the option is given to the plantation owners. So they can, if they want, they can register themselves under ESI. And in case if there is only one employee in an establishment which is engaged in hazardous or life-threatening activity, they are dangerous activities, then powers to extend the ESI coverage for such establishments. And mines, yes, if there are 10 or more employees, then mines will be covered under ESI. Prior to courts, mines are not covered under ESI. And the presumption as to the accident while commutation between residence and place of employment, earlier by default, it was not considered to be an employment injury, right? It was based on the theory of notional extension. It was decided, but now by default it would be considered as employment injury. If it is not so, then the otherwise is to be proved by the employer. And in case if an employee who is to be covered under ESI but not covered, or registered under ESI but contributions are not paid, then the ESI corporation can extend the medical facilities to that employee, but whatever expenditure incurred, they can recover it from the employer concerned. And gratuity, yeah, I think fixed term employees are allowed under the codes. So you can engage persons for a specific period of 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. But fixed term employees would be treated on par with the permanent employees from day one, right? If they are relieved after the period expires, say after 2 years, then they are entitled for gratuity on proportionate basis. So the qualifying period of 5 years is not applicable for them. It is minimum 1 year only as far as fixed term employees are concerned. And with respect to working journalists, it is 3 years. And with respect to other regular permanent employees, the qualifying period of 5 continuous years, that will continue, right? Same thing only for gratuity. And other areas under Code on Social Security, if there are more than 50 employees in an establishment, then creche shall be provided. Some of the rules, it provides for 50 or more women employees. So for your establishment, depending upon as to who is the appropriate government, the position could vary. But generally, the code says 50 or more employees only. And employment exchanges will now be known as career centers. And if there are 20 or more employees engaged in an establishment, then this employment information portion under Chapter 13 of the Code on Social Security Act code will become applicable. And presumption as to accident with respect to employees compensation, it is the same position as we discussed for ESI. And yeah, finally, last 2 points, talking about the unorganized workers or the gig workers or platform workers. So all these workers are now defined. You can go through, I think I've given the sections: gig worker, home-based workers, platform workers, employed, self-employed workers, wage workers. Now these are all, I think, considered to be workers in the unorganized sector, for whom now the social security benefit is available. Earlier it was not so. Bits and pieces, yes, it was there, but not on a regular basis. But now it is available. The aggregator of the platform would be made liable, responsible for all this. Of course, we have to wait for the scheme to be introduced for this purpose. And in case of assessment for ESI and PF, the claim can be for the last 5 years, not beyond that, right? The compounding of offense, increase in penalty, all same cases. Instead of inspector, they will all be known as inspectors cum facilitators. And the last point, Aadhaar number. I think this particular section is already in force, right? For identity of a person, of an employee, please make it as a part of your recruitment kit. Get the Aadhaar details, copy of the Aadhaar of both the pages of the individual, because when you want to disburse any benefit, I think Aadhaar would remain as the base, not only with respect to the individual, also with respect to his family members, at least the first degree family members, so that in case of death of the employee, you may have to make the payment to any of the legal hands or the family members. Yeah, now I think we move on to Industry Relations Code. So the definition of the term industry is modified in line with the Apex Court's verdict in Bangalore water supply case. This decision was given as early in 1978. Any place where any systematic activity is carried on with the cooperation of both employer and workers. And the third ingredient is to satisfy the human wants or wishes. If these 3 ingredients are there, then that place would be considered as an industry. That is what the court said in this particular judgment, very, very landmark judgment. But this comes into the statute book only now, right? But it is there in practice already. Okay, but if some industry, if it is into domestic services or institutions, if they are engaged in charitable, social or philanthropic services, they would not be treated as industries. They are excluded from the application of any of these codes. And in case of concerted mass casual leave, if more than 50% of the employees in an establishment go on casual leave, then that would be treated as strike. So the definition for the term strike is amended to include this also. In case if somebody is involved in willful go slow, that will be treated as unfair labor practice and action can be taken against that person by the employer. And the last point is for layoff, retrenchment and closure. The establishment has to get the permission from the government if there are 100 or more workers. That threshold of 100 is getting increased to 300. I think this is the main point for which the unions were opposing, right? This is one main point. But of course, this has come into force. Instead of 100, it is made as 300. So up to 299, the establishments need not go in for getting permission from the government for layoff, retrenchment or closure. And reskilling fund is introduced. So probably in case if a person is retrenched, then 15 days wages of his last done salary that will be calculated, and the employer has to make the payment to a fund to be created, which is known as reskilling fund. Today, that concept is not there. The idea is to use this fund to reskill the retrenched employee so that they are made employable in future. That is the idea. And the grievance redressal committee, the maximum number of members is was six prior to courts. Now it is 10. Instead of 6, it is 10. And for strike and lockout, minimum notice period is 14 days. And the maximum was 6 weeks earlier. Now that is made as 60 days. So between 14th day and 60th day, they can go on strike. Then a time period for filing a grievance application is reduced. It was 3 years earlier, and it is reduced to 1 year now after the introduction of courts. And time period for raising industrial dispute before the conciliation officer, it was 3 years. Now it is reduced to 2 years. And standing orders and trade unions. Applicability of standing orders if there are 100 or more workers. That was the situation earlier, but now it is 300 or more, right? But in case in your establishment you are having 150 employees and you have a certified standing orders, you can continue to hold that. My suggestion from Aparajita would be you send a letter, send a communication to the authority concerned stating that we got this standing orders certified already, but now we have only 150 workers, but we understand through the courts it would be applicable only for establishments who are engaging 300 or more, but still we would like to go ahead, continue to have these standing orders applicable to our establishment. Just send a communication like this, then you can continue to adopt those standing orders. And only the central government will have powers now to come up with a model standing order, right? Earlier, not only central government, other appropriate governments were also providing the model standing orders, but now after the introduction of courts, it will be by only the central government. And in case if application is made for certification of draft standing orders, and if there is no response from the authority concerned for 60 days, then the approval is deemed to be given, right? Then fixed term employment, as we discussed under social security, it is permitted, but from day one, they will be treated on par with the permanent employee. But of course, their services can be dispensed with after the expiration of the period for which their engagement was agreed to. And currently, that is prior to courts, there was no provision for compulsory recognition of trade unions, but that is now brought in through the courts. So, so if in case if there is only one trade union in an establishment that needs to be recognized, or multiple trade unions are there, the one trade union having the membership of more than 50%, that should be recognized. But none of the trade unions, if they have the membership of more than 50%, then the employer has to form a negotiating council, right, at the rate of one representative for every 20% of workers. So some body will be available for negotiation with the management after the introduction of courts. And compounding of offense, yes, like any other code, it is available under Industrial Relations Code also. Yeah, I think we have come to an end. This is again just a gist under code on wages. Yes, as we discussed, wages redefined, HRA not part of wages, gratuity not part of wages, minimum wages applicable to all industries, Floor wage, it is given statutory backup. Salary ceiling of 64,000 removed for payment of wages. Salary disbursement to be made before 7th. Deductions cannot exceed 50%. Wage settlement to be made within 2 working days, even for resignation cases. Bonus ceiling, it is not going to be common, but we have to wait for the notification from the appropriate governments. And the concept of single registration or single license, it is introduced under Occupational Safety Code. The definition for the term factory is redefined. Overtime, yes, it is possible, but only with the consent. Women workers can be employed during the night time, of course, with their consent. The eligibility for for availing leave, I think the minimum number of days is 180 days instead of 240. And the threshold limit for safety officer, for appointment of welfare officer, or for providing canteen, all coming down. And amenities for third gender, it is to be provided. Threshold for contract labor, it is getting increased from 20 to 50. Core activity defined, and employers cannot engage contractors for core activities. Regular employees of contractor will not be considered as contract workers. Interstate migrant worker definition is changed. Appointment orders are mandated. Health examination is made compulsory. And code on social security, voluntary coverage is possible under ESI. Mines brought under ESI. And qualifying period for gratuity for if set of employees is 1 year. For working journalists, it is 3 years. And for others, it is 5 years. Contract workers now eligible for gratuity. See, contract workers are coming under the definition of employees under the Code on Social Security. So now straight away they are entitled for gratuity if they are otherwise eligible. And Social Security for unorganized workers, it is planned. Of course, we have to wait for the schemes to be introduced. And under Industrial Relations Code, concerted mass casual leave will be treated as strike. Willful go slow will be considered as unfair labor practice. Time period for raising industrial dispute is reduced from 3 years to 2 years. Reskilling fund is introduced. Threshold increase for layoff, retrenchment, and closure from 100 to 300. Fixed term employment is permitted. Compulsory recognition of trade unions, it is brought under the codes. And finally, yes, this deemed approval provision, it is brought in. Compounding of offences will be applicable. It's a part of decriminalization only. Records can be maintained electronically. Online submission of returns applications is available. Inspectors come facilitators in the place of inspectors. I think with this we have come to an end. I believe you would have enjoyed this session, and you would have got a fair idea of all the 4 codes. But of course, going ahead, we may have to wait for some more clarifications. But one point I wanted to provide you is, see, the codes are introduced, but the rules are not yet done, right? So I think that will take another 3 to 4 months for framing and notifying the rules. But till such time, we can continue with whatever set of rules applicable to us already, right? That is what is information we gather. And particularly after the end of December 31st, definitely we all will be busy in preparing the returns and submitting it. For returns, we can continue to use whatever formats and whatever rules we have been already using, we can do that. But definition, in filling up those columns, no, we may have to derive the definitions or changes brought in through the codes. So while filling in the columns, the content-wise, it could change, but the procedure, it would remain the same till such time the new rules are brought in under the labor codes. Thank you so much. And it is back to you, Shreya. If there are any questions, I think it is already 1.5 hours, but I think for next 10 to 15 minutes, we can take up questions.
Yeah, sure. So we will now move to the Q&A session. I would like to invite Muralidharan sir to select a question which Vardhan sir can address.
I couldn't find any questions on the chat box. I couldn't find any questions in the chat box.
Okay, I'll share it across, sir.
Even if there are no questions now, please drop in your mail. Subsequently, we'll try to address it.
If there are many questions, I'll just ask to be shared with him. Sir, I have shared a Word file with you, meanwhile, on a mail. Yeah. Did you receive my mail, sir?
The investor term you can read out, Shreya.
Okay.
So, okay. If any employers would,
Yeah, go ahead.
if any employers would offer a fixed term employment for 11 months, so that the employer does not have to pay gratuity.
Something.
No, the qualifying period is minimum 1 year. Leave out whether it is fixed term or regular or whatever it is. So it is less than 1 year, which is the minimum. But since this person has not completed 1 year, may not be eligible. That can be a technical point as to whether completion of 240 days could be treated as 1 year. But the outer limit, it should be at least for minimum of 12 months. So in a continuous period of 12 months, that person should have worked for 240 days.
Behind this question is whether if some employer consciously restricts that fixed term contract for a period of 11 months to avoid paying this gratuity amount, whether there will be any consequences to it from the department.
He can do so only for one time, no, again.
If they are renewing the contract for 11-month basis,
Then it is not, it will not be treated as fixed term. See, there are technical points, no? Yeah.
They will give a break. Technically, they will give a break for 1 month. Then
Again,
So tell me what industries are doing if a person is taken as a temporary employee for 11 months. It is similar to that only. But see, let us not try to circumvent law.
Correct.
Right. That is not the idea. Yeah. The idea is instead of the employers carrying an employee till he attains the age of superannuation, this provision is brought in since many of the industries ask for it. So generally, if we want the services of a person for 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years, you can do that. Subsequently, you are allowed to dispense with that. Right. Still, if you want to resort to some practice to circumvent, no, then that is not considered to be genuine. It can be questioned. It is unfair. Right. Yeah.
FNF settlement is to close within 2 working days. Practically difficult. Any exceptions are allowed?
No, it is not difficult. That's what I'm saying. Because even today, that is the position. Only in resignation cases, this provision is not there. But now, so we may have to come up with a stringent process. That's why I said you may have to insist for serving the notice period. At least 1 month or 2 months, whatever it is. So you will have sufficient time. See, now we are equipped with technology, no? So we should be ready for doing the settlement at any time. Yeah, but as such, no exemption is available, right? So we may have to whatever given here.
The another one is again this similar query. In case of completing full and final settlement within 2 working days of last working day, if the asset or recovery from employee is not closed, what would be the provision?
Yeah, you can take any measure to recover it from the individual concerned.
Unions have approached the courts, unions have approached the courts on implemented. Now increasing salary of workers, is there any provision of salary increase with the implementation, and is this applicable with immediate effect? Or will take 3 months long time? Mahesh Rajane, you could actually understand the query.
Yeah, the query is not clear, but still, yes, this has come into force. Now the courts, so at least 50% of the monthly gross of an employee shall work out to wage portion.
Can we raise the salary effective January 26? Or do we need to do it immediately?
That is individual management's decision. Yeah, reasonable time, it is okay.
What will be the basic here? How do they arrive at basic? That I think he has already clarified. Similarly, what can get covered in defray special expenses? For example, we pay allowances to employee to cover a part of their rent every month. Will this be considered under wage or can we exclude it under point E?
No, it is based on the nature of employment of the individual. Say, for example, the persons who are in the field, right? So they will always go out. They will not regularly come to office. They will be in the field, out under the sun, right? So for that category of employees alone, some amount may be paid as daily allowance or something like that. So that will be excluded, and that will fall under a sum paid to defray the special expenditure because of his nature of employment. So for each payment, no, we may have to look into that.
Need your suggestion whether the incentive amount is considered as part of the statutory wage for calculation purposes.
No, I think the purpose of payment of incentive is to be known. Generally, if we are making this payment merely as, again, part of wages on a regular basis, this will be treated as salary only. But if there is some contingency attached to that, then that will get exempted. Periodicity of releasing this payment will also play a crucial role. In case you are making incentive payment once in 3 months, as per your policy, once in 6 months, once in a year, you need not consider this payment as salary. And your policy should be clear.
Is the night shift allowance also will be excluded?
Yes, it is a contingent payment. Only those persons who are engaged, asked to come during the night shift, they alone will be paid. So it is not the universal payment.
Please confirm annual variable bonus is covered under exclusion.
No, exclusion. Yeah, it will come under exclusion. If it is really bonus only, no.
Variable bonus.
Whatever it is, whether it is variable or fixed, if you are making the payment once in a year, right, then you need not treat it as salary.
Then there are questions about CTC. I think we will speak that because CTC is not part of a level law. In case of Maharashtra and West Bengal, where HRI is mandatory, in that case, will it be part of wage as per code?
No, it will be part of gross wage, but it will get excluded.
When classes A to I under section 2 is excluded from wage definition, how can class D, F, G, and HR get included for payment wages and equal compensation?
No, that is a specific provision, right? So only for those two purposes, they are not excluded. Instead of coming up with a separate definition, no, the same definition, they have come up with only two areas where that would still be considered as wages. Yeah.
What is the annual bonus amount is fully discretionary with no value attached to it. Assume it does not include into CTC, then for the purpose of 50% this.
The question is not clear.
Are these laws applicable only for contractual laborers or full-time employees also?
For all.
For all it is.
For all.
Date of implement. What is the date of implementation? It is, if it is for code, it is 21st November.
Yeah, 21st November.
Is commission considered sales incentive or productivity linked incentive for manufacturing site?
Okay, generally commissions are excluded. It may be part of monthly grass if you are releasing it on a monthly basis along with salary, but it will exclude it from the wage portion.
Is there any cap fixed for conveyance allowance?
No, to my knowledge, no.
Next question is, if we need to process gratuity today, should we process as per the new wage code or as per the old one?
Yeah, in accordance with the definition of new definition of wage.
Is it a good idea if company is looking to add entire 50% to basic? And how does it impact?
It is better the basic and DA, the wage portion, works out to 50%. We'll take one more question.
Yes.
With that, we'll wind up.
In case of most MNCs, payment of performance incentive is not covered by definition of bonus and is referenced more or less part of the individual CTC. In that case, would this performance incentive would form part of the wages for computing the 50% for sure.
Yeah, see two things. One is if a particular payment is to be considered to be bonus made under the Payment of Bonus Act or that particular portion, then it should be based on the profit and loss, or it can be considered to be productivity linked payment, for which the return agreement between management and the representative of the workers, it is essential. Only in these two situations, if the payments are made, that will be considered to be one payment made under Payment of Bonus Act. Right? I'm not very sure whether what you are referring to as performance incentive would fall under that. That depends upon the process which that particular company is following. If it is not so, then if it is paid as per the policy of the company, if the period is not 1 month, instead it is quarterly or 6 months and 1 month, then you can keep it out of the purview of salary. Right? If it is made on a regular basis, that too along with salary payment, then that would be treated as part of wages. Yeah.
One last question. So ESI previously was not covered, now it is covered. Will there be a provision to add someone in this specific time period? We could understand the query because are you referring to the establishment?
If the individual is coming under the purview of ESI Act from 2111, then from that date onwards, he is to be covered. Right? Yeah. Thank you so much once again, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. And a big thank you for delivering such a clear and insightful session. We truly appreciate the depth and clarity of the topic that you defined in reference with wages, minimum wages and everything. Thanks for that. And thank you for all the participants for joining us and engaging with this discussion. Your presence made it more valuable. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.